Hello.
Hi.
My name is Nick Mburu from Nairobi Lifestyle, and we are so glad to have you today. Kindly introduce yourself to the people.
Thank you for having me, Veronica Ndegwa from the Institute of Public Finance.
Yeah. Finance, you said.
Yes.
We have so many questions as a country.
Yep.
And especially, we have the Gen Zs who are trying to get information, and sometimes we do not know where to get the information. And we've attended a seminar today where you trained us a few things and informed us, and I think it would be very important for us to just share the same with our audience. So my first question would be, as a country, tuko na deni, and our debt is every single day we get new numbers. Do we have a debt according to you?
Well, yes, we do. And before, just for context, our work as IPF is around PFM. So we generate research around debt issues, tax policy, as well as government spending, and welcome everyone to check the kind of research you have on our website. And today's engagement is to sort of share our research findings on debt, transparency, and accountability in Kenya. So to the specific answer to your question, yes, we have debt, and it's growing at an alarming rate. And right now we are headed to 13 trillion. So by the end of this financial year in June, we'll have crossed the 13 trillion mark, and it's not heading there, because in the coming financial year, as you've seen in the budget policy statement that was submitted to the National Assembly towards the end of last month, we intend to borrow an additional 1.1 trillion in the coming financial year.
Wow.
So that is to say, we have a significant debt stock right now, but given the budget numbers we have now, the government is intending to borrow more and more in the coming financial years. Before
we get worried about the numbers, my question would be, who is giving us these debts? Who is giving us these loans?
Okay. So a government has an option of borrowing externally. So this is from the likes of the IMF, the World Bank, and any other country that would be willing to lend to us. But we have seen also an increasingly the government borrowing from also commercial sources. So this is in form of Eurobonds. We began borrowing through Eurobonds in 2014, and it has become a go-to source of borrowing for the government. So other than external debt, we also borrow domestically, and this is in form of treasury bills and bonds. The difference is bills tend to be short-term, 3 to 6 months, and then for bonds they'll have a maturity of more than 6 months. So they are normal bonds that the government issues, and sometimes the government will issue infrastructure bonds. So this is how the government borrows externally as well as domestically.
Okay.
Yes.
So that sounds like we are doing better in my thinking, because we are not borrowing from outside, we are borrowing from locally. Is it a good thing?
Yes and no. So when the government does its borrowing strategy, and in Kenya we have a document we call the medium-term borrowing strategy that sets out the framework for borrowing, and it will tell us if the government will borrow more externally or domestically. But what we have seen in the past few years, we've been shifting from 50-50 mix of external debt and domestic debt, and increasingly borrowing more from the domestic market. This partly could be due to missed targets. So for example, the government in the financial year 2024-2025 had a 65-35% target for domestic debt, 65%, external debt 35%. But when it came to actual borrowing, more than 80% of the debt came from the domestic sources. So probably it's because it's becoming increasingly harder for the government to get debt to borrow externally. But then it's not necessarily a good thing. When analyzing government borrowing decisions, we look at two things: the cost of borrowing, this is the interest the government is paying, and the risks associated with the debt. So for external debt, you have to look at currency risk. So our government debt, external debt, is around 65% in USD. So in case the Kenyan shilling today was to depreciate, our risks, external risk of debt would increase significantly. But then when you look at the interest rates comparing external and domestic, the domestic interest rates are usually higher. So that means borrowing domestically does not have the risk of forex risk, yes, but it has a higher cost. So every time the government is making a decision on where to borrow, there has to be a detailed analysis on costs and risks, and that is what determines what strategy the government will borrow or what share of domestic debt the government is going to acquire.
So when you talk about the expense on the rate at which we're getting the loans for,
yep,
for the local ones, what's the percentage?
So they vary, yeah, but we saw in the last 1 year or so, the interest rates had gone up to around 17%. Wow, so that would mean, yeah, so that would mean if you lend to the government 100 shillings at the beginning of the year, they'd pay you 117 shillings when they are repaying you back. But because the government has been revising down the central bank rate, then we have seen borrowing interest rates falling below 10%, which is a good thing. The only risk that also has come with domestic debt is that because the risk of the government not being able to repay debt comfortably is increasing as we borrow more, then lenders are not willing to lend longer term debt. Yeah. So the maturity profile, the time to maturity of our debt has been reducing. So then we have faster maturing debt, which means then we have to spend more and more revenues on servicing our debt.
Okay.
Yep.
Looks like we are borrowing a lot. Is it a problem of our expenditure, or is it a problem of are we having a challenge on repaying the loans that we previously took before? What is going on here? Why is the mix-up?
So three things. Number one, expenditures. Our expenditures have been growing at a faster rate compared to our revenues. Then that means that we've continuously run on fiscal deficit. So what that does is, because year on year we have a fiscal deficit, our debt stock will increase, meaning we'll have to spend more and more on repaying that debt, and especially the interest payments. Yeah. So you see, we have additional two sources of pressure, from additional borrowing and also from growth in spending. And because revenues are not able to catch up with our expenditure, then it means we have to continuously borrow. But that is not to say that our revenues that have not been growing. If you look at the revenue numbers for the past 10 years or so, our revenues have been growing, yes. We are still below our target of 25% of GDP. We have been around 17% of GDP, yeah. But they have still grown, and sometimes the growth rate has been as high as 10%. Yes. So some have argued that we do not have an issue in growing our revenues. It is that we are spending, we are increasing our spending too much, creating the need for us to borrow. So I think in terms maybe of what the government can do is looking at our spending and see where we can cut on our spending so that we can reduce our borrowing.
Okay.
Yeah.
So from where I see it, I look at KRA, it's doing its functions. Yep. We are paying our taxes. Yep. I think in the last 5 years, we've increased our taxes in several commodities. Yep. And definitely it comes back to, the total collection is going high. Yep. We are also borrowing. So there is more money coming in, in our coffers. Right? Yep. So the one thing that I get here is our expenditure is too high. Yeah. All right. Yeah. So my question is, who do we count on to look into the expenditure? Who is going to be accountable for this? Yeah. Yeah. Does the government have an institution to hold someone accountable for the expenditure?
Yes, we do. Yes. The National Assembly, at least in terms of the roles assigned to the National Assembly in the PFM Act, it has an oversight role. But we've seen in some assessments that we've done, including the Open Budget Survey, there's still a significant gap in terms of parliamentary oversight. So for example, the past 2 or 3 weeks ago, there was a public participation around the budget policy statement. But most of the time, the National Assembly doesn't take time to scrutinize the numbers that are submitted to them, and in terms of even looking at how well we have spent previous budgets, so that we can see if there's value for money and see where we can cut some of the spending. So some of the gaps you're seeing in terms of how our expenditures are approved and even the borrowing that is done in the country is partly due to gaps in oversight at the National Assembly side.
If you don't mind, would you take us through the process of acquiring a loan for the country?
Right. That is a difficult one. This is a compressed way of the way I understand the process.
Yes.
So we'll have a budget framework that has spending and has total government expenditure, and it has total government revenue. Then you look at your spending and your expected revenue from taxes and other times from other sources like levies, like what you have under the affordable housing levy. So you look at your total revenue basket and your total spending. The difference between the two is what you call a fiscal deficit. So if your revenues are lower than your spending, then it means you have a deficit in your budget. So what the government does is look for borrow money to fill that resource gap. Once the fiscal deficit is set, and most of the time it will be set within the budget policy statement, then that information is shared with the Public Debt Management Office that then does a medium-term debt management strategy. So this strategy says we have a fiscal deficit of 1.1 trillion. How are we going to fund this fiscal deficit? How much are we going to borrow externally? How much are we going to borrow domestically? So every year we'll have the two documents being submitted to the National Assembly, and they're usually what we call medium-term documents, so it will be cover the next 3 years. So in this case, up to the financial year 2028-2029. So for the next 3 years, this is our fiscal deficit. This is how we intend to borrow. So for example, for this year, the target is to get as much as 83% of the resource needed from borrowing to fund the fiscal deficit. So once that is done, and then after the two documents are approved, they're usually approved early in the month of March. In April, we expect the program-based budget to be done and submitted to the National Assembly. But once the program-based budget is done, we also expect another document that we call the annual borrowing plan. So we'll have said we want to borrow 83% from domestic market, we want to borrow 17% from external sources. So what an annual borrowing plan does is tell the government these are our expected sources of these loans. How much treasury bills are we going to issue? How much treasury bonds are we going to issue? How much will we get from Euro bonds, that is an external source? And for example, if institutions like the World Bank or the African Development Bank is funding us, it will also move into that resource basket of external borrowing. So once all those resources are put together, that is what we see in net borrowing in a certain year. And when you add net borrowing over the years, it's what we come to the debt stock we are talking about that is close to 13 trillion now.
Wow.
Yeah.
So let me ask you, we've seen over time the Auditor General come out and tell us that there are places where we need to look into. Some of the funds that were, we got as loans were not properly utilized or have, a few discrepancies here and there. So let me ask you, in your position or in your experience, and when she comes and tells us that, who are we supposed to go to? Or we already have the information, some money might be missing or were not utilized the way they were supposed to. Who are we supposed to follow up with that?
So once the Office of the Auditor General has released their report, the next step is usually for that report to be reviewed by Public Accounts Committee. at the National Assembly. I think the most common one we have seen is PAC committee on the Senate levels, asking governors questions and to justify some of their spending choices.
Yes.
But then for the national government, we have a PAC committee, the Public Accounts Committee of the National Assembly. So once an audit report comes out, then it's supposed to be scrutinized by the PAC committee of the National Assembly. So ideally, because the National Treasury is responsible for government borrowing and spending,
yes,
then they are the ones supposed to, the Cabinet Secretary National Treasury as well as the PS National Treasury are supposed to respond to some of those audit questions that the OAG raises in her reports. Once that verification is done and the National Assembly requires for more information to answer some of the questions that are flagged by the OAG, then they're supposed to make recommendations to the executive so that they can take corrective action. But then we usually have a gap in that. There are delays in terms of when the PAC committee reviews the audit reports.
Yes.
And even when the PAC committee makes recommendation to the executive, some of them are not implemented. And that's why we see recurrent issues in our management of public finances.
Yes.
Yeah.
Thank you very much. I really appreciate you informing us about, some of these things. I hope you enjoyed this show, and we hope that you're going to subscribe and also follow us.
All right. Thank you so much.
Asante sana.
Asante.